Yeah, I wanted to start off with just a basic introduction to yourself, to the team, and what brought you into the design world, and I guess educational background and whatnot. The stuff that
Yes,
they don't know yet, I guess.
right. Um, so I guess I'll just start with my current position. I'm a senior designer with Honda R&D in the digital modeling and visualization group. So my main duties involve translating sketches to 3D properties so we can build our digital assets and then build models or mock-ups and that sort of stuff. That's kind of a broad overview. I'm also involved with a lot of our VR activity. That's obviously one of the reasons I got into Gravity Sketch, was kind of trying to find tools to use within the design pipeline that involve virtual reality. Um, how I got into design is a long story, um, but I guess the end all was I never knew what industrial design was, or I always wanted to get involved with vehicles and make cars. So I think out of high school, I went and worked in a body shop for a little while and decided that that's not the route that I wanted to take. And then it wasn't until I saw the TV show Overhauling with Chip Foose, and one of the guys on there was like, "Oh, I went to school for industrial design," and that was probably in, I don't know, 2005 or 2000. Yeah, probably 2005. And I did some searching and was like, "Oh, industrial design. That's exactly what I want." And that kind of led me down the path of, finding out about transportation design and what's involved with that. Because I had always grown up drawing and working on cars and racing and stuff like that. So that was a perfect kind of avenue into that. And then I went to the University of Cincinnati um, for transportation design. And that was almost 10 years ago now that I graduated. So it's been a little bit of a road to get to that. But now, right out of college, I got a job at Honda, and I've had the great opportunity to be involved with the design there and kind of spearheading a lot of the new digital technologies that we're using, which is great. So it's been a fun time.
Yeah, and just to pick up on where you just left off, you've been using Gravity Sketch for you're pretty much like the longest like power user that I know personally.
Yeah, I was looking it up last night because I was curious about actually when I started, and I can't believe it's been 3 years or over 3 years. So that's kind of crazy to think about, because it seems so short. Like, oh, it's still new, but it's not. And
Mm.
now I think back on my workflow and how it's kind of changed. I can't do it any other way. It's just so easy to just pop on the headset and start drawing in 3D. And for me, it's natural because I use it. I mean, I was using it every day for at least an hour for 2 years, right? So you kind of get into that workflow, and it's hard to break those habits. Which this isn't a bad habit. It's just now every time I sit down to do something, I'm like, oh, I'll just do it in Gravity Sketch, because like making a curve and alias is tedious, right? Or we're sitting down with Moto and just doing now with Sub D. It's just easy to jump in and start pushing and pulling things around. So it's really beneficial. Yeah, so I had gotten my headset um like early 2017, maybe like January. And before that, I think it was at CES, I saw Tilt Brush. So it must have been like late December of 2016. I saw Tilt Brush, and then I think I saw Oculus Medium somewhere. And I was like, oh, that's a really cool tool. And then when I got my headset, it included Medium and Quill. So I messed around with that. That was like January, I think. And then I just did a search because I was doing a lot of research on different design tools in VR, and I just happened to come across the Gravity Sketch beta site. And I think you guys had done it because I had done some research. I think you had done a Kickstarter, and it was a bit different. It wasn't actually in VR at that point. But then the website for the beta, it was like, oh, give us $20, and I'll let you join our beta. And I was like, oh, sure, yeah, $20, that's fine. And then it was like, maybe it was closed at that point, and I think a month later, I you guys gave me access to it, and I immediately was like, yes, this is the tool, because you have quill and medium, and even tilt brush, they're very like sculpty, right? There's not a lot of control, where immediately I can edit points in Gravity Sketch and actually change the curve. That was like mind blowing to me at that point. And from there on, it's just been new functions and new tools, every month, and it's great. So yeah, that's how I got started.
Yeah, you've definitely influenced a few tools as well. So appreciate you being a part of it for so long.
Yeah, no problem. It's great to. I've always, just to touch on that. It's always one of those things where it's like I've always wanted a tool in another software. I'm like, how do I do that? And it's very rare that you get to influence, the workflow or the actual software that you're going to be using, and kind of tailor it to work with you. So it's been great.
Yeah, we love working this collaboratively. It helps us really like jumpstart into certain workflows that we have no knowledge of. And this is
Right.
a good transition into the workflow bit, because before working closely with you, I personally didn't have like a very strong understanding of poly modeling. I'd done some Maya and a bit like that, but no one in the team. I was mainly a NURBS guy, and no one in the team really had that deep knowledge of yeah, subdivision and polygonal modeling, and it was something you kept chiming in about over and over again in our chats. And he's like, man, you convert the nerves to, and so then I kept like heartburn on Daniel. Daniel, we gotta like investigate sub D, investigate polygon modeling. So yeah, it's like maybe a perfect opportunity to talk a little bit about your workflow and what tools are in your workflow, both Gravity Sketch and others, and yeah, maybe if you have anything you want to share at this point, it'd be cool to talk through that.
Yeah, I mean, currently, my workflow is pretty much just starting Gravity Sketch. I have the Quest, so having it on there is awesome, because I could just sit on the couch and kind of doodle away. I do a lot of the line work, I guess, or on the Quest, just because I don't have to be connected, and it's pretty lightweight. And I'll probably start to do some surfacing, or some stuff like that, but usually then I'll hook it up to my computer and go from there. And then I get as much done as I can in Gravity Sketch nowadays. And then if I need to fine tune stuff, I'll bring it into Modo, or even Alias now has a lot of, they have the sub D tools, which is great, because I can use Alias to convert all the sub D data into NURBS data, and then I can treat it like a traditional Alias model, where I can project curves on and trim it and start doing all the cut lines and all that sort of stuff. And then from there, it's just visualization. You got to make it look good. So I've been using Bread lately, or VRED. Before that, I had used Visualize, or SolidWorks tool, Visualize. But now that Bread has the GPU AI denoiser stuff, that's really helping the visualization. I mean, renders are done. I mean, not instantly, but if you're adjusting colors and stuff, it's really nice to just turn that on, and it's like, oh, and then go back and change the color. So that's really beneficial. So those are pretty much the tools that I use almost exclusively now. I had been picking up Blender a little bit, but it's one of those things where I'm a lot faster in Modo if I need to do sub D stuff, or Gravity Sketch, depending what I want to do. So it's always a hurdle to learn a new tool when you're more efficient with another tool, but that's just the way it is. So
yeah, and at what stage, like if you're starting Gravity Sketch, at what stage do you feel like, all right, I'm probably time for me to hand off and jump into keyboard and mouse world? Like what is that transition period for you?
it'll depend on the project, really, like what the actual output is going to be. Like if I'm going to just do a render, so it's building for visualization, then you can just have things intersect and not worry about how the surfaces are actually tying together. You can fake a lot if it's just for CD. So at that point, I'll probably just go right from Gravity Sketch. If I have to fix a couple things, or if there's something not quite right, I'll bring it into Modo. But then I'll just go right into VRED, and just start painting it. If I need to do cut lines or detail stuff, then I'll go into Alias, convert it to NURBS and start trimming it. And, if I want to build like headlight buckets and, all that sort of stuff, I'll do that in Alias as well. But I've actually been finding I do a lot of that in Gravity Sketch as well, especially kind of um, like headlight detail, like just faking kind of graphics to make it look like there's something in the headlight, because you can usually just make a couple of strokes and it looks like an LED bar or something like that. So I'll do that in Gravity Sketch as well.
That's cool. Yeah, it feels like you came to the tool, or you started to explore the tools to speed up the workflow or to be more creative. Like what would you say the rationale for like moving in this direction?
Yeah, for me it was about creating a 3D property quicker, doing the sketch lines, and now being able to just build sub-D data gets me there within hours, which is great.
And what do you think? Like, you've been able to prove out of most of the people in the automotive industry that I'm connected with, you've been able to prove pretty clearly without a reasonable doubt that this is a much faster way of working in a much more dynamic way, and you can actually achieve more creative work in this, at least the way that I see you working, what you challenge in your workflow.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is like the stumbling block for other designers that are stepping into this space and want to get involved in, not just the virtual reality world, but like also picking up some of the new polygonal modeling tools, just trying to compress their workflow to get to an idea faster?
Well, it's probably two different things. They either have somebody that can do that for them, like they'll have a modeler that they work with. The other one, which I kind of touched on even with myself, is learning a new tool can always be a challenge. And VR itself we're finding people are like, oh, it's cool, it's great, but they don't spend enough time in it to actually gain that value from it. They look at it as like, oh, it's an interesting tool, and then you sit them down and say, okay, learn this or spend some time in it, and then they get busy and then they don't, and then it's like a month later and they're like, oh yeah, how do I do this again? And they have to start from scratch. So I think it's just getting people to sit down and spend time with it. But that's with any new software. You have to put the time in, or you're not going to want to learn it. And then that kind of goes back to, oh, I'm quicker working in my other workflow, right? There's a speed at which you work, and then your learning is gonna be plateaued for a bit until you can actually get past where you were previously. And a lot of times you give up before that you cross over that threshold of being faster with a new tool. So it's unfortunate, but that's just the reality. People don't like change, I think.
Yeah. have you taken someone through that onboarding experience of Gravity Sketch? And if so, like how long did it take? Where did you find like the challenges? Where did they get it straight away? Like, how was that process?
Yeah, I think I've done it with multiple people actually, and you guys may have spoken with Ilya Bryden. He was one of the first people that I taught, and he picked it up within like a day, and he uses it still. We chat all the time. He's a friend of mine, and there's people like that are like, oh, this is definitely beneficial, and they understand what they want to get out of it, so they can use the tool in a specific way. Where some people, it's almost like they're being forced to learn it. They were told, hey, go learn this, and then they say, oh, I gave it a try, I didn't like it, and that's the end of it. So it's tricky. I think it really just comes down to the people, but most people pick it up. We've have quite a few people using it now. I think probably at least 6 people, and they all picked it up within a couple of days. They were able to navigate through the menus and kind of at least sketch lines. Some of the more technical stuff like the surfacing and now even the sub-D is like a whole nother learning curve, because subdivision modeling, there's edge flow things you have to worry about, and topology, like how do you manipulate the polygons to make the surface even type kind of build theory that is a whole nother learning curve. But that's the same with Alias and the other modeling software.
Yeah. And I guess if you look at it from the full start to finish, how much time do you think you've saved in your workflow by looking at this kind of new tool chain and maybe if you just use like one example of a project that you've worked on recently, maybe not one of your personal projects, maybe something more for work related stuff.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like, typically, let's see, I could make a car, we'll say, in 3 days, right? Using traditional, we'll talk about sub-D modeling, maybe like 3 days. Now I can do it in a day. So, I mean, it's a pretty good time savings. And that's granted, there's nobody giving you feedback and making changes, right? But that's inevitable. So I would definitely say it's at least cut it in half, if not more, depending on what you're trying to make. So, and especially the early ideation phase, the biggest thing is you can put a sketch on the wall and it looks great. It's a really flashy sketch, but none of it is going to work in 3D, right? When you start actually making those curves and the design lines in a three-dimensional space, like, it just doesn't work, but it looks cool. And that's one that gets picked. And it's like, oh, great, it's one of those. So being able to kind of do that while you're developing the sketch would definitely speed up the process, because then you actually know that that sketch is feasible to be in 3D, or that it'll actually work.
Mm-hmm.
And it also allows us to do more that way, so you can actually choose the better design, not the better looking sketch, as in styling or flashy and stuff.
I mean, this is probably a good point. We didn't really talk a whole lot about the automotive industry and the design, like, culture in that industry. And it's maybe a good point to touch on it. Do you think that there will be a time where these tool sets could interface with the traditional forms of sketching and still tell that very compelling story? Because you pick one of those beautiful looking sketches because it invokes a certain feeling, right? And that's really hard to reproduce with most digital tools. And I mean, 2D digital tools like Photoshop have obviously accelerated that. But in the 3D space, it's almost like your brain has to start solving 3D problems so fast that you may lose out on some of that emotional. What are your thoughts on this kind of merging these two worlds together?
Yeah, I've always thought about that, because you spend you spend the initial time doing the sketch before you do that final sketch render, I'll call it, that you're going to present to somebody. So it's like you already kind of have planned it out beforehand, or you're going through the sketch process, you're creating these ideas. It's like, at that point you can actually just start doing it in 3D once you've made the image for yourself. At least this is how I work. Like, I'll do the chicken scratch or the doodle and then start doing it in 3D, and you can output that as a 2D image and then make it look pretty, right? Like, after the fact with 2D tools. Presenting it in a 3D format is a little trickier, because unless everybody has a VR headset, you're never going to actually get that true sense of form, or the true depth of it and volume of it. So you have to present it on a 2D screen as like a turntable or something. So yeah, that's the weird transition part. Like, how do you make it as compelling as that really dynamic 2D sketch? And I don't know how to answer that. It's always a tricky one.
I mean, that's the biggest goal you could see from the way that we've been developing over the past, like, more than 3 years. At least you've been privy to some of our developments, most of them. We've always tried to, like, lean towards that emotional gestural kind of language in the tool. And it's still a pretty big push for a lot of people to get to that. I mean, some people are incredible, right, on Instagram, and they're totally getting it. Jump in and they want to start editing points immediately. So they kind of don't, I guess they don't quite capture that aspect of it. And maybe it is just
right.
a thing.
Yeah, and that kind of gets back to the way people are used to doing it, or how they feel comfortable doing it as well, right? We have people that are choosing the sketch, like managers and stuff, and they're used to looking at it in that format. So you have to change that overall culture of how things are being evaluated and what's the best way to evaluate them. And that's like trying to steer a tanker and you're the little whatever. I forget that the other piece on the rudder that like, is the small piece. So yeah, it's tricky.
Well, usually when you come in, you give us like a list of stuff that you'd like to see in the application. I think this is a fitting moment for you to share a couple of your wish list, but also maybe shed a bit of praise as well for some of the things that you like.
Yeah, no, I mean, actually last night I just posted on the Slack channel. I thought it was a bug because I had realized it. I had seen it like a week ago where I can grab multiple things and edit them, but it never would move both points. And last night I was just playing around and seeing what was new because I haven't actually used the beta in a couple weeks. And I noticed you can edit multiple points or multiple curves and at the same time. And that's just keep doing that. That's great. So,
Yeah.
and then the edge creasing tool, that's a big one too, because we can talk about it in a minute, but that the model I did that's on the website, that was just more of a study about topology, and adding to get all the crease lines is like 2 times more work than just creasing, because you have to add a loop on each side. And so that's a big game changer. That's a time saver there. And it also allows you to kind of tighten the character line that you're trying to make by just looking at that hard edge and not have to worry about the bevel on either side of it if you missed a point and stuff like that. So yeah, that's definitely good. Merging sub D objects, I mean, that's been there for a little bit, but that one's huge as well. So I think overall you guys are doing a great job. Every time I open the software, the beta at least, I'm like, oh, there's something cool, like the new little tool or something, which is always good. And I think I've always, because I've kind of grown with the tool, so I've been able to kind of fit it into my workflow. So I'm actually a bad example of somebody to ask about, like, oh, is the UI good, the UX? I'm like, I don't know, that's just the way I've used it that way. You kind of ignore little things. Not saying you guys have any bad UI or UX.
We have loads we have to work on. Yeah.
But it's one of those things. I had a conversation lately about using the tool because I was teaching somebody, and it's like, oh, why is it done that way? I don't know, it's always been done that way. So I use it, But overall, it's great. Just keep up. You guys are doing a great job. So yeah, I think the landing pad is great, especially if I'm on the Quest, doing the just sketch lines and stuff, and then just plugging the headset in and being able to access the same file, right? It's just saved to the cloud. I mean, that's great. And then even sharing files is awesome. I've kind of just used it for that. That's really my only reason I use it that way. But because a lot of times if I'm working locally, I just have stuff saved on my desk or my computer. But overall, I mean, it's a great way to access stuff, especially if you're kind of away from your desktop, especially with the Quest, your mobile, right? You can be anywhere and you're like, oh no, I need to get something. So as long as you save it there, you're fine. So
cool.
Yeah.
And then on your collaboration experience, talk us through a little bit of that.
Well, I think I had emailed you about it. The biggest thing was audio.
Yeah.
Because we had 3 people in, and there was an echo, and then we spent about 30 minutes just getting it to work, or getting the audio to work, because people are unplugging headsets and stuff like that, and going through the audio settings. The biggest problem was on my end, but it was never fully resolved, but it was workable. But definitely just interacting is great, like making something and then someone's like, oh no, let's change this over here, and just being able to collaborate on a 3D model, it's just such a new experience. Yeah, this one, I mean, in Gravity Sketch, it's nice because you can just circle an area and note in the air, and like on a clay model. So say we're doing a clay model review, people will actually take tape and just start taping on the clay, like, oh, this graphic needs to be higher or lower. We have silver and black tape because all our models are just silver and black, and silver will get rid of a black area, black will add, a graphic somewhere. So that's what they do. But you can do that in Gravity Sketch with just curves, right? You start laying out points, move this line this way and that. So Yeah, because you can actually be like, someone can work on the rear. It's just like a clay model. You have three people. Somebody's working on the front end, someone's working on the rear end, someone's doing the body side and the rest of it. Because that's usually how collaborative design is done, is they choose a sketch with one front end, another from the rear, other side, and they add them together. But yeah, but I mean, that is definitely the biggest thing, is just being able to talk to somebody while you're creating a curve. Like, you draw it, you're like, oh, what do you think about this angle, or that sort of thing, and they could say yes or no right away. You don't have to sit, model it, send them a screenshot or send them the file, they look at it, then get back to you.